Hey Bat fans, welcome back to Room 237, and I do have another Christmas themed story review, and this is a comic review. This is one that I really wanted to get to last year, but I had to reread it to sort of refresh myself because I read this years ago. And then I wanted to do it again this year, actually on Christmas Eve, but as life goes, things came up. But I figured since I'm doing these Christmas reviews, I guess until New Year's Eve or whenever, why not do it now while I can? And it is a Batman review, and it's one that I'm sure a lot of readers have at least heard of. Even if you haven't read it, I'm sure you know the story. But it is 2011's Batman Noel, which was written and drawn by Lee Bermejo. Now, people probably know Lee Bermejo as this very hyper-realistic, very detailed illustrator. He's known for his very dynamic stuff. And it's a story that's not really in continuity. In fact, if it's connected to any kind of continuity or universe, it takes place part of the same universe of the last Batman book he was involved in, which was Brian Azzarello's Joker, which came out in 2008. Which that was more of like a comic book. The art styles are very different. That definitely feels more like the word that comes to mind is flat, but I don't really want to say that because it is very good artwork. But it's very different. And then it will be continued with Azzarello and Bermejo's Damned, which actually came out quite recently. I have reviewed that. So Batman Noel, and the reason why I say I'm sure people know the story is because it is a gothic, modern retelling with Batman of Charles Dickens' 1846 immortal story, A Christmas Carol. Excuse me. And it figures I had the sniffles and the runs, nose runs, while doing this review because Batman has pneumonia in this story. But, so it came out in 2011, and this actually is not the first time someone has taken Batman and tried to blend it with the Charles Dickens classic. Back in the 90s, during the Legends of the Dark Knight, Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale did that, which was later collected in Haunted Night. The third story in this, called Ghosts, is Charles Dickens again, only it's far more brief, and it's actually centered more around Halloween than it is Christmas. But this is an interesting take on it as well. But this is definitely full on, it even, the narrator even calls Batman Scrooge because Batman is the Scrooge character. Only it's definitely more rooted in reality. It doesn't really go into the realm of paranormal or supernatural. The one time there is a ghost, you kind of get the idea that it's kind of like a fever dream or a pneumonia-induced hallucination. And this was actually one of the first Batman comics I ever read. This is one of the first ones my girlfriend bought me, I think our first Christmas together years ago. I had a small handful of comics at the time, so I got this probably 4 or 5 years ago. So yeah, I had to reread it last year, didn't have the time, and then this year I finally had. I wanted to do it for Christmas Eve because, of course, Christmas Carol didn't happen, but I was able to refresh myself for this. And one thing that I really like about it that Bermejo really wanted to do was, well, unlike Joker and Damned, this is actually written by Bermejo as well. It's a full Bermejo package. As far as the art goes, he did do the pencils, but it was colored by Barbara Ciardo, and the letters are done by Todd Klein. Now the letters is even dedicated with respect to Charles Dickens. Bermejo really wanted to blend the idea of a children's storybook, a children's picture book, with a modern Batman comic. And I think that, more than anything, even if the Dickens stuff doesn't fully work, the whole children's book aspect does work flawlessly. The narration doesn't have boxes around it. Very little usage of panels. It's more so just pictures put together. It does feel more, and then of course with the artwork, I mean, it does look and feel more like a children's Christmas Carol or Night Before Christmas type storybook than it does a straightforward comic. And since that's what Bermejo was going for, I think that's an absolute home run. Now, I know a lot of people, I know Bermejo is kind of polarizing. For the most part, people really love his realistic artwork. I myself am a big fan of his artwork. But there's a lot of people that think his hyper-realism takes away from the comic book aesthetic, which I can appreciate as well. But in a book like this, where he's going for that classic storybook feel, I think it fits perfectly. And as far as the earlier when I said it takes it very literal, it is almost as if they could have told their own story about, because it's all about Batman being portrayed like a Scrooge. You know, he's not necessarily the greedy businessman, but the ruthless, punishing crime fighter that he is. More like, sort of like Frank Miller turned up to 11. And then he has to sort of learn the error of his ways and then become the better hero at the end. They almost could have done that without going the Dickens route. I know that's another thing that some readers and reviewers have said, especially since they do kind of hold your hand along the way to let you not forget that this is a take on the Dickens story. But I liked it. I like that it took the Charles Dickens source material and it made its own thing out of it, as obvious as it does get at times. Even acknowledging that the people that are visiting him, even though they're not spirits, the storyteller or narrator just refer to them as visitors, and how there's 3 and so on. Almost 9 minutes and I haven't even really talked about the actual story. But it's narrated by a Wayne Enterprises employee. I'm guessing a very low on the totem pole employee named Bob Cratchit. So that's very obvious. But in this, he's a single father. He has one child, Tim. Never referred to as Tiny Tim, but Tim. He does mention once that he has a bum leg and a bunch of doctor bills, and they're piling up. But it never draws attention to the fact that he has a bum leg or a crutch. He doesn't have a crutch. But, so Bob is our narrator, and he's telling the story to his son, Tim. And we get the idea that Bob is so down on his luck, he's had no choice but to go work for the Joker. He's doing an odd job for the Joker, thus putting him on Batman's radar. he does show up to, he has to drop off a bag, pick up a box of money, bring it somewhere else. And that's where Batman intervenes. And most of Batman's dialogue is interrupted with coughs because, he's, like other Batman stories, he's not allowing himself to sleep or to treat any kind of sickness he may have, or even treat his body accordingly to weather and elements. So he's contracted, apparently, pneumonia. And so he gets Bob. And Bob isn't like Johnny Frost in Joker, who's an aspiring criminal. He's a guy who's absolutely desperate. And he doesn't want to do this stuff. But, Batman threatening to really beat him up and get answers out of him, but the guy doesn't have any answers. And he puts a bat tracker on him, and he even allows him to go back home, which Batman has taken Joker's money from him, or made it so he didn't have Joker's money. Puts the bat tracker on him, and he says, "You're lucky that you're better live bait than jail bait," meaning he's going to let him go home with his young son and wait for Joker to come. And that's pretty much the epitome of how ruthless he's become. He's going to allow Joker to go to someone's home where there's a child and just assume he's going to get there in time. And so Batman goes to where Bob was supposed to go. There's a note from the Joker, pretty much knowing Joker was going to beat Batman. Or Batman was going to beat Bob before he got there. But then we see where Bob lives. And he lives in this crappy, dingy shack of an apartment. Tim is like the sickly, optimistic child. Like, he makes this sort of Charlie Brown tree in a coffee can with, broken beer bottles, Army Man toy as ornaments. He tried to put the Superman S on the army guy, and he says he wants to have a Batman symbol for decoration. So that's when Bob's like, "Why the hell would you want that?" And the kid pretty much says how, well, Batman is one of the good guys. And that's kind of... I just lost my train of thought on that. I apologize. And, he says, Batman stops bad people. And that's when Bob says, even good people can do bad things. And every time Bob refers to Batman, he calls him Scrooge or Scroogey. And so then Batman goes back to the cave. We see him with Alfred. Alfred kind of berates him for his choice of allowing this man and his young son to be live bait for someone like Joker, and that he should take care of his body because he's sick. And Batman is really, in this story, just a much more, even calling them small fish so he can catch a bigger fish. Really not looking at them as people that he's saving. He's using them as objects to justify his means. And that's when, Alfred even talks. And he says how, eventually this young kid is going to grow up to be just like his dad. There's a lot of references of black and white in this story. Good, black and white, good and bad. There's no gray, which is what Bob is. A desperate man who's been forced to do this. Is that this kid's going to grow up, just be like his criminal father. He's on the bad path. I have to, correct him in front of his son so his son learns. And that's when Alfred kind of talks about how there once was another young young man who was on a bad path, but the path you put him on, something bad happened to him, which he's saying standing right next to his Robin suit. And it's at this time where the only time we really see a spirit in the story, and I guess it is a pneumonia inspired or conjured vision of Jason Todd's Robin kind of telling him, well, it says deliver a warning, but it's not like he really says anything. It's just like we see the mannequin in the Robin suit kind of come to life, and Batman sees it. And Batman goes back out. He meets with Gordon. Gordon tells him that Catwoman has some information on Joker regarding the Cratchits. And Gordon mentions his cough. Everyone mentions his cough. It's kind of like the what smells like shoe polish in Clerks. Meets up with Catwoman. And again, I just love how much this looks like a children's Christmas picture book and a comic at the same time. Also, I love the Bermejo bat suit. I don't care what anyone says. I love that homemade but armored bat suit. I know that this is one of the inspirations for Pattinson's bat suit in the upcoming Matt Reeves film. They said homemade and somewhat archaic, mixed with a bit of Bermejo and a bit of the Arkham games. And so when they released the trailer in those stills, that's exactly what I saw. They delivered on it. People saying, that's not a real bat suit. Well, it's supposed to be the first of its kind. I think it looks like even the symbol, I think looks like the Bermejo symbol. I really enjoy it. Whew. So Catwoman represents the ghost of Christmas Past. Now, while she doesn't take him by the hand and show him his literal past, at least to that extent, she does talk to him about, she does represent the playful cat and mouse games that they play, or that they played throughout their tenure as hero and villain. And we see older costumes of Catwoman and Batman. Batman always smiling, more of like an Adam West inspired suit. All the different chases that she's led him on during a happier, more playful time. And in more of an optimistic, still seeing the good and the light in the tunnel Batman, which is now crusted and rusted into this embittered Batman. But they have their rooftop chase, and he sees, he kind of catches glimpses of things of his past. And we get these awesome, very realistic Bermejo drawings of Penguin, Scarecrow, Two-Face, which I love. And then, of course, they cross over Crime Alley, where his parents were killed. Well, actually, then they have their argument where he's like, sick people like you. And she's like, I'm nothing like your other villains. I'm much more than them. And we even see that the pneumonia is taking over Batman's skills of survival, because while he's chasing her, he grabs a gargoyle that breaks. And he falls into Crime Alley, where he, sees Batman's birth, where his parents were killed. And then we see the Ghost of Christmas Present, or the representation of, which is Superman. And I think this fits perfectly, because Ghost of Christmas Present is always a very warm, bright, both in colors, but also just like this glowing hue coming off of him, but also a very jolly, happy person. That's larger than life. And Superman is definitely that. I love the contrast of just the really dark and muted colors and the blacks and the grays of Gotham and Batman and the snow versus this very warm, radiant Superman. And Superman being the shining beacon of hope definitely fits Ghost of Christmas Present. But he's not a ghost. He actually literally is there, and he's come to help him. He even does his x-ray vision and says, you definitely got pneumonia. And again, what I meant earlier about how the narrative never lets you forget that is the Dickens story is the night was far from over, though. See, Scrooge was still expecting 2 other visitors. So it never lets you kind of get lost in its own story. It keeps reminding you, like, hey, it's Charles Dickens. Like, remember? Like, what you just saw was Christmas past. He's got 2 more. And so now, this will segue into the present. You remember that, right? And Superman says, well, let me at least give you a lift to your car. So he flies him around. So this is technically more like a Christmas ghost from Christmas Carol, because he is flying him around. But he shows him the things that are going on today. Like, he shows him the Cratchits, like Tim drawing Bob a Christmas card with Batman on it. He shows him the home of Commissioner Gordon, and how no matter how ruthless and embittered Batman has become, there are people like Gordon that still believes in him. Gordon has opened his home up to this one officer that was outside, invites him in for coffee and warmth, and the guy's like, you still trust that Batman, huh? I don't know what you see in him. And Gordon pretty much defends him and says, you know, he is one of us. He is still a good guy. So Superman shows him all these things. But he also tells him how, you know, he uses the analogies of how you have to show them your face. Not necessarily show them your face, but, you know, you gotta show, pretty much saying you gotta tone down your exterior. You gotta show that just being a good, hopeful person can affect the people around you. If you give them something to fear, it's not going to work out as well. And of course, Batman just kind of rebuffs all of it. Superman drops him off at the Batmobile. Batman goes to activate it so he can get in it, and it explodes. Now, I've heard some different interpretations of this visitor. Some people think this isn't happening at all, and it's more just a dream, more like a fever dream. But I think this actually is happening. But it was blown up, and then he's dragged by the 3rd visitor, which is the Joker. Now, the Ghost of Christmas Future has always been, I guess, a Grim Reaper, but the scary ghost, the one that instills the fear to change. So if I was doing this, I agree with Sal from Comic Pop. Why not make it Scarecrow? I mean, you could have had it Scarecrow, and Joker still could have been the main villain of the story. I think Scarecrow would have been certainly, it certainly would have fit the metaphor the best. But here it just makes it seem like Joker's getting involved to get him out of the way of Bob Cratchit. Maybe that's the case. But Joker drags him to the cemetery and throws him into an open grave. And yes, there is a big debate over the cuts in his face of what came first. Azzarello's Joker book or Heath Ledger. There's big debate on that. But anyway, he throws Batman into the open grave and there buries him. And here Batman has a dream of a future without him, where he has died. And it's kind of like the Sons of Batman from The Dark Knight Returns, but far more ruthless. It is just looting and chaos and riots and people taking the brute, ruthless, violent force and idea of Batman and using that to instill their own private justice on everyone else. Like, it's no longer... Like, the idea of Batman is more just about, you know, justice, there is a price. And it's just all out fire and war and chaos. But also Commissioner Gordon for helping this vigilante is sentenced to 30 years in a penitentiary. Alfred is also sent away, but it also shows him having to auction off all things from Wayne Manor. Earlier I said 1846 for Christmas Carol. I apologize for that. It's actually 1843. I just saw this here in my notes, so I apologize for that. But anyway, realizing that if he continues this path, everyone that he allowed to get close to him and help him, no matter what he's done, it all leads towards something bad. If he continues this path, the idea of him will just be violence and chaos. Those that have been close to him will be arrested or, you know, be cast out by society. So he frees himself from the grave, which at this point, Joker has made his way to the Cratchit home. He roughs up Bob and terrifies Tim, at which point Batman crashes through, stops Joker, and then this is where he has his change for the better hero moment. Bob gets a hold of Joker's revolver. Joker sort of eggs him on to shoot him. Batman tells him that he's not a criminal. Show your son what kind of man you are, what a true hero is. Bob puts the gun down, lets the police arrest Joker. And then, you know, it shows Bruce resting with much warmer colors in the cave. That he's sort of seen how his actions and behavior affects people. And we see that the next day he does do the Scrooge sort of redemption where he brings a huge Christmas tree to the Cratchit home. He offers Bob, you know, a better job at Wayne Enterprises with, you know, paid time off, 401k, full benefits, a raise. Stopped by the police station, I guess showed his appreciation there. And the whole thing about this story is, like, can people really change? Like, do you believe that someone with an extreme, strong personality can just change? And it sort of ends with, it can happen. I guess it's easier to swallow than 3 ghosts, which I do like that line. It ends with Tim playing outside with the Batman cape. And talking about happy endings and, you know, it's not always the happy ending that matters. It's the moral or the message of the story that matters most. And I love how, you know, you look at the 1840s of Charles Dickens, or at least the illustrations, like, this does a good job at maintaining that aesthetic. Just sort of like a seedy city. It's not fog, but like smoke from or steam from the sewers. Just sort of this depressed look that's maintained throughout the entire book. But it has that ray of light at the end when things are happier. I love the aesthetic of Bermejo's Gotham City. It does maintain its look of comic book Gotham City, but also sort of keeping that Victorian sort of Charles Dickens era city. And then the final page, it shows, Christmas tree, holiday ham, and Tim sitting on Bob's lap saying, I don't know, what do you think the moral of the story is? And this, to me, looks just like a children's picture book. Like, this looks like something that your parents would read to you in front of the tree on Christmas Eve. But Bob also talks about the story, like, the way my old man would tell me and what my mom liked about this story, showing that this Charles Dickens Christmas Carol story is something that gets passed down from every generation, which it is. It's one of, if not my favorite Christmas story. And now he's kind of putting his own spin on it with Batman. Bob is through Bermejo. I think Bermejo did a great job with this. I'm not sure what else he's written. I definitely have a number of his works that he's been the illustrator for. But this is another one of those instances where the interior artwork actually matches the artwork on the cover. That rarely happens. Like, there was the, I can't remember, Denise Mara, I think it was, of Hellblazer. And also the Andy Diggle run of Hellblazer. He did the covers and the interior covers, but not the interior story artwork. It is very different. So it is nice here to get an amazing, awesome looking cover, but also get the same artwork as the story. And again, yeah, people say it takes away from the comic book aesthetic, which in any other story, I'd probably agree. But where he's trying to make it look like a children's Christmas picture book, I totally support it. And I think, if anything else, like I said earlier, that's the biggest success of this story, is blending children's picture books with comic book. So what is the moral of the story? I think it spells it out perfectly. It's not, obviously Batman is a good guy trying to make the world a better place. It's how he goes about it. It does show that in the past he was happier. He was more kind-hearted and lighter and less excessive force and rage and anger that drove him. And that it's not just what you stand for, but how you go about it. That can make your legacy all that much more impactful. I hope that makes sense. Yeah, it's the same as any other Christmas carol. Be a good person. Don't be a dick. That was what they said in Comic Pop, which I agree. It's definitely deeper than that, but I mean, yes, they did really amp up the asshole Batman a lot in this story, but it's out of continuity. They did need to make it more Scrooge-like and more ruthless, so it fit the narrative. But, it did have, the last few pages where it shows him righting his wrongs. And, it isn't just about excessive force and using fear. Sometimes you do have to be a true hero to get things done and be more impactful. I would be surprised if this becomes, I could even see hardcore Batman fans with kids using this as their Christmas carol for their kids. This is one of the first ones I read because it was a gift. When I first started collecting comics, I liked it then. I still like it. also where it's more of a realistic take, not so much spirits and ghosts. It is more so my taste, but Batman Noel, great artwork. Bermejo even said, "You're not going to write as good as Dickens, so why even try? Just try to tell your story the best you can." And I think he did that just as well. I didn't mean for this video to be that long. I know I say that every time. New Year's resolution, make shorter videos. Batman Noel, I think it's as good a Christmas story as any Batman one can be. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this long-ass review, but yeah, I hope you all had a Merry Christmas. I know it's being uploaded after Christmas, but I thank you all for watching.